Hey there. I want to talk about our DNA for a moment. And this may ruffle some feathers. That's not my intention to ruffle feathers. I'm here to help people with their conscience before the Lord, and to instruct in a way that helps people stay free of bondage that the Bible warns us about. Our DNA. Adam was created in the image of God, right? And then he fell. And then when he had Seth, we are told that Seth was in Adam's image and likeness. And we know that that is a corrupted image, that sin and death now rule. From Adam all the way down, everybody has been born in iniquity, in sin, and death has reigned, and corruption has ruled. We are corrupted from the image of God since the fall. Okay? And that is most likely genetic as well. Obviously, there's all kinds of problems in our genes. Plus, we know about the Genesis 6 stuff and the tampering with all flesh. But, God knows our DNA in his mind. He created us in Adam. And he knows we fell. And he knows who we are. And we are not just our DNA. We are not a computer program. Okay? The computer program of our DNA is for our body to reflect physically based on what it receives from who we are spiritually. And who we are spiritually is really independent of that. Okay? It's really important to understand this, because people think that if our DNA is tampered with, we're no longer eligible for salvation. Well, I'm sorry, but your DNA is already corrupted. And, my mom is she's a biologist. She was a forensic scientist. She has a master's degree in biochemistry. She's one of the top biologists. She's very famous. And she was, part of the WashU gene sequencing stuff and all that. Okay? And she always told me, this is going to sound silly, but, don't expose yourself to too much sun, and don't get tans. Don't go to tanning salons. They're radiating you, and those radiations make changes to your DNA, and you don't know what is going to result from that. It corrupts your DNA. And you think about all the cesspool we live in with the chemtrails and the radiation and the cell towers, all the different things, plus thousands of years of weird breeding, bad breeding, and DNA mutations, all that stuff. Okay? If mutation from the DNA was a problem for salvation, that would really be limiting to God and the power of our salvation. And unfortunately, with this whole culture of the Nephilim stuff, and I knew about the Nephilim in the 90s, but it's spun up into a Christian sci-fi genre. And most of these people don't have the gospel right. 99% of them do not have the gospel. And yet they're informing everybody about all these alien technologies and this, return of the Nephilim and the corruption of the DNA and the CRISPR edits and transhumanism and all that stuff that we need to be so afraid of. And now it's just saturated everybody's thinking. And, if you've got people pretending to be Christians to sell books who don't have the gospel right, you shouldn't be listening to them. They've got an agenda. They're part of the world system. They're part of the spirit of air. They're part of the Antichrist system. And now, Christians, many of them, are failing simple gospel tests, who've been solid on grace, seemingly. They're failing gospel tests. And they're calling things sin that are not sin. bringing people into bondage, bringing them into problems with their conscience, and bring them back to legalism. Jesus said it's not. He said, he told people so strongly, I tell you again, it is not what enters the body which defiles it, but which proceeds out of the heart. Adulteries, fornication, wickedness proceeds from the heart of man, not from what he puts in his body. And Paul said, let no one judge you unworthy of your reward by administering self-chosen lowliness with do not handle, do not taste, do not touch, concerning things that all perish with the use, when that kind of rule system has no value against the true indulgence of the flesh. You're not less self-indulgent because you don't smoke, or you don't drink, or you're vegan, or whatever restrictions you put on yourself. That is not of any value against the indulgence of the flesh. In fact, it strengthens the flesh. The better you are at it, the more prideful you become. You know what's the least pleasant thing to do is to have a vegan over for dinner and let them lecture you about your food. You become intolerably obnoxious anyway, apart from the gospel. But sadly, people are failing the gospel test left and right. What do I mean by failing the gospel test? They think they're going to lose their salvation over this thing, or that people are not eligible for salvation, when God loved the world and every man in it, and everybody from Adam. All of us are under sin. All of us are silenced by the law. All of us are condemned. All of us are judged worthy of the cross, and that's where our flesh goes. Okay, nobody has pure flesh that's worthy to be redeemed. It's all corrupted and it's all condemned to the cross. That's why we were crucified with Christ. That's why we have to be recreated. And thinking that your genes are getting corrupted more because of this and that, again, I think it's very selective. You know, people want to make an issue about the medicine, and I'm like, okay, you are broadcasting this message on a cell phone that's radiating your DNA. You know, that, by the way, was probably made in a slave labor camp and a Foxconn thing in China, where people are committing suicide because of how bad the working conditions are, so that you could get it cheap. So don't let people tell you you're sinning because of what you put into your body. What sin comes out of your heart, and it's really wicked, and it is I do believe it's a test. It's a gospel test, and people are failing it left and right. You need to be simple regarding evil and wise regarding the gospel. Now, we are not battling flesh and blood. We're battling the principalities, and their attack is through ordinances. If you look at Colossians 2, you see that Christ, when he crucified us, he slew the commandments and ordinances. He blotted them out, taking them out of the way. And then it says it's spoiling the principalities, making an open show of them, triumphing over them in his death on the cross. But the triumphing over the principalities is specifically related to the blotting out of the handwriting of ordinances. Why? Because it's through ordinances that the principalities bring Christians into bondage. Do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. And they're hurting people around and manipulating them. I've already spoken on this quite a bit, but you can go look at my Mark of the Beast Fears playlist. These guys who designed this thing, we're talking about the medicine, knew exactly what they were doing when they were taking the patents out 666 and putting all the... They are the ones disseminating the information that you're getting through what you think are truther sources. Most of those truther sources are Masonic, Jesuit, Illuminati plants. They're not gospel-believing Christians. And they're making merchandise of the saints. And behind it, there is a spiritual war on the saints. And the goal is to silence the gospel and to corrupt it. It's not about your DNA and how corrupt they can make you with your DNA. What they want is to take the gospel out of your hands and bring you into bondage. And I know that what I say isn't going to reach out and change anybody's mind, and but at least on my channel, I hope you guys get this, that you cannot make this a sin issue without damaging the gospel. I don't know what else to say about it without getting really in depth and then having the video censored because you're not allowed to talk about these things. But it's really sad what I see when I go look at the walls of people who are talking about this thing and railing against those who have taken it or whatever. And I look at the comments, I think, wow, this is what apostasy looks like. These people, they don't understand the gospel at all. And they are bound up in fear and superstition. And it's like the Dark Ages. It really is very medieval. The amount of it's superstition, it's fables, it's wives' tales, it's myths. And remember, Paul said in the last days, people are going to heap up for themselves teachers after their own lust. They're no longer going to tolerate sound doctrine, and they're going to go after myths and fables and wives' tales and endless genealogies, which, by the way, all of that stuff back in that day was tied into Nephilim hunting and the Book of Enoch and all that kind of stuff. It was Jewish fables, and that's what Christianity has become caught up in. Is there's a whole new sci-fi genre for Christians that's basically Jewish mythology spun up again, and people have heaped themselves teachers after their lust for 20 years to tickle their ears and be entertained with the latest theory on this stuff. And these guys have been working hand in hand with the establishment. It's a gigantic psyop. I'm not going to pretend to know the end of it, but I know it's manipulation. And there's a spirit of a fear attached to it. And people are failing the gospel test left and right. They are deviating from the faith through this thing. And it's as bad as Hymenaeus and Alexander, who Paul said their mouth must be shut. Their words are like a gangrene, spreading and overturning the faith of households. Whole households are being overturned. The people's faith is being overturned by this. It's sick. It really makes me angry. So I just, every once in a while I have to say something about it. And no, there was a comment on my wall, but that's not what, actually that person I would like to respond in a kinder manner. He was just curious what I thought. But this is coming from a bunch of people bringing to my attention that people are being brought into bondage by so-called gospel preachers. It's sick. And the Lord is righteous, if you ask for quail because you don't like manna, he'll send so much quail that you'll be eating until it comes out of your mouth and eyes and you fall over dead. That's what he did, And that's what this stuff is. People were flirting with it for so long, and now they're swimming and drowning in it, and they're literally spiritually dying. That doesn't mean they're losing their salvation, but they're losing any sense of blessing, any taste for sound doctrine, any vision of Christ beyond a hard taskmaster, and they're losing their security and their assurance, and they're drowning in legalism, and their crown is being stolen from these people that are bringing them into bondage. Yeah, it makes me mad. This wasn't the most spirit-filled message, but I needed to express a little bit about it. All right, take care.